The meeting, so just for everybody's benefit here and online, we are recording the meeting, so just a polite disclaimer to please be respectful. I mean, we are primarily an advisory committee here, so I don't doubt that we all will be. But everybody's being respectfully of each other. Just know that you are being recorded, so this will be followed.
I think we might have with that, and have, I think we might have critical points.
All right.
There's many as we're gonna see. 1, 2, 3, 4. I think we have 8 advisory committees. No, 8 are here.
Oh, yes.
Do you know anyone RSVP that can't come?
I don't know that Aidan would be the person.
But that, we're at 4:05, I think I see, 4:04, so we might as well get started.
Yep.
All right, well, thank you all for coming to today's Battery Street Corridor Scoping Study first official meeting. This is the first convening of the advisory committee for this project. And we're gonna get right into it. Just a brief agenda for everybody's benefit ahead of time. We'll do introductions. We will introduce our project team, which is made up of folks from my team, BHP, or the consulting planners and engineers on the project, the project owners, the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission. And then we'll have, we have the city of Burlington with us today. After a brief introduction of our team and our advisory committee, we'll move on to a quick public comment period, in which we'll also mention the upcoming first official public meeting of this project. Beyond that, we'll do a brief overview of what a corridor scoping study is and the project area in question, as well as the general scope of the project and the schedule. We'll speak briefly about you all and what our hope for you, the role of the advisory committee, how we will lean on you throughout the engagement and general project development of this study effort. And we'll then get into an open discussion of the vision for the Battery Street corridor, the goals for the project, and we'll conclude with next steps. Quick introductions. Go ahead and start. My name is Drew Jengris. I'm the project manager for this study effort with VHB. I'm joined today in person by my colleagues, Jen and Karen. They'd like to introduce themselves.
Jen Conley, advisor.
Could you speak up? I'm sorry, thank you.
Jen Conley, I'm an advisor on the project for VHB.
And Karen Sintoff, I'm a transportation planner and engineer and mostly involved on the public engagement aspects of this.
I'll go next. Jason Shrest, the project manager on behalf of the CCRPC for this project, and Eleni Churchill, our planning, our transportation program manager, excuse me, will be assisting throughout this effort. She's not with us right now. She's away in Cyprus visiting her homeland, but you'll see her at some point throughout this project.
I am Ravi Venkatraman. I'm the transportation planner for the city of Burlington. Dayton Kreitz, the senior transportation planner for the city, is the lead and the main contact for this project, but I'll be providing support and assistance from time to time.
Thank you all. And now we're going to step through our advisory committee. If I think we know this is organized, as you see it on the screen, why don't we go top row, beginning on the left and move right, and we'll read it like a book. If you are either with us in person here or online, I can't see everybody online, but please feel free to introduce yourself, starting with Barbara.
That's me.
And I prefer Barbie.
Barbie?
Yes.
All right.
And I represent Board 3.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Do we have,
I'm Terry Rivers from Ward 5.
great,
No, Norm is online.
Norma's here.
He wants to unmute and say hi.
All right, Norm Baldwin, city engineer representing Burlington Public Works.
Hi, my name is Kilmani Vaughn. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm with the REIB and I'm an economic analyst.
Gene Bergman, City Councilor, Ward 2, and on the city's Transportation, Energy, and Utilities Committee.
We have Kelly on.
Kelly on it?
I don't see her.
And what about Charles?
Charles on.
Not Charles. Charles, no Brendan.
Yeah.
Brendan Hogan from the Public Works Commission.
No, Karen.
We have Karen Paul.
Didn't see Karen. I do see Sophie with us, right?
Yes, I'm Sophie Sauvé. I'm Parks Comprehensive Planner with Burlington Parks Rec and Waterfront.
So we have Jamie from GMC.
Jamie. No, Jonathan.
And what about Jonathan? All right. So there, it looks like we're a few members absent today, but as we mentioned at the top, the meeting's being recorded, so we'll be sure to share it with everybody at its conclusion.
We missed a couple of people, Ann Nelson, then Elizabeth, I think. So you can introduce yourself.
Yeah. Hey, everybody. If my name's Ann Nelson. Sorry, my video's off. Our internet's being a little funky right now, but I am the Equity and Engagement Manager for CCRPC and hope to be here as a resource as needed.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Sundberg. I'm with BHB and I will be assisting with the transportation planning aspect as well as the public engagement. Nice to meet you guys.
Let me just say that folks are muttering, or the acoustics here are really bad for my ears. I might just be getting old.
Okay.
But if people could speak clearly and a little bit more slowly, and the folks up there, that would be really appreciated by me, because I
didn't
appreciate that.
Yep, we can do our best.
Thank you.
Can you turn the volume up on?
I don't,
My volume's on max. I don't know if there's any controls on that owl.
not that I'm aware of. We can take a look. Just, if you are speaking in from the Teams meeting, if you could try to speak up a little bit so that it comes through in here.
I would also suggest for next meeting, closed caption as like best practice.
Yeah. Good suggestion. Thanks.
Turn that on right now. Right.
See,
So moving on, we are reserving this time for a brief public comment period. I'm not sure if we saw anybody online joining us from the general public. Just for everyone's benefit, we are in the process of scheduling the first public meeting for the project. That will be in mid to late April. And that will be the local concerns meeting. And we will be distributing a meeting notice for that as soon as we get that date locked in. I believe the intent will be for it to be somewhere either along or immediately adjacent to the Battery Street corridor. So please look for that meeting notice, but if anybody is here from the general public and would like to provide a comment, please feel free.
Could I ask a question? I'm seeming to be a pain in the ass, but, was this public, so was this publicized on the city's calendar?
This was not something that was publicized. This is not a public meeting per se. But with that said, if somebody from the public did want to attend this meeting, they were welcome to do so. So that's why we always have to set aside that period. But we will have a public meeting coming up in April that will be publicized.
There will be a total of 3 deliberately specific public meetings, as well as a number of other touch points with the community throughout the process.
I would just say that if the intent is to say that these meetings have been open to the public and we've solicited people, that we do a really good job of warning it and getting that information out. If we don't use that, then, you don't have to do that, because you've got the public comment meetings for that. but you can't have it both ways. So it would seem to me that if we are encouraging folks to comment on these, that we want to do the best job we can, so that you can honestly say, you know, when you come to places like the Public Works Commission for their work, or the city council for our work in terms of the funding of this or the regulations of this, that we can reasonably rely on the representations. Anybody who's been involved in the North Winooski Avenue bike lanes knows how important this engagement process is from the beginning.
Yeah, the reason this is on there is, as far as I understand, is that we're just required to have it. It's not the intent to put this out there for the public and invite public to this meeting. Don't want to give them a false sense that this meeting is geared towards them. It's not. It's geared towards the advisory committee specifically. But with that said, you know, we'll be getting our website up and running for this project, and advisory committee meetings will be posted on that website. They'll be posted on our calendar. The city's welcome to post them on their calendar. It's just not something that is geared towards public input.
Taking enough time.
Moving on. So what are we talking about today? We're talking about the scoping study. Jason?
Sure. So we wanted to provide you all with just a little introduction to what this study is, if you've never been involved with something like this effort. You may have been involved with a corridor study in the past or a scoping study in the past, and to put it simply, we're trying to combine the two elements of those. So we are taking a look at Battery Street. Forget the limits, but all of it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Maple Street to Sherman Street.
Yeah. And you know, we'll be working to develop corridor alternatives for the stretch of Battery Street, along with alternatives at key intersections. We have a few intersections that are slated for what we would call a scoping level detail, which is kind of a high level detail, and with the idea that we can get some consensus on a preferred alternative for those intersections. And once this plan is completed, the city would then be able to proceed with attempting to design and secure funding and implement those alternatives. Some of the other intersections in this corridor, we don't have the capacity to go to that level of detail, so we're going to stay at a higher level and just try to narrow it down a little bit, with the acknowledgement that it will require future study to go through all the other details that we're not able to capture as part of this effort. So there will be, I guess, subsequent scoping efforts that will likely follow this study. And just have a few images below of, you know, Colchester Avenue and the course of evolution there. You know, that started in 2011 with a corridor study. There was a little pilot that came out of that. Some of you may recall a road diet that happened there. There was a shifting at the intersection of Pearl and Prospect. And following that, we had the Pearl and Prospect scoping study. That was where there was a little something that was done there. And then we also had a report for Colchester Avenue and Riverside Avenue. So the two intersections at either end of the corridor. And those have actually just recently been taken up by V-Trans as part of their program. So those are now moving forward. And most recently, with VHB's assistance, we just completed the bikeways, parking, and intersection safety study. So that's a long way of saying that, you know, this study will likely, hopefully, lay the groundwork for lots of future things to come. It may be future study, but could also be things that will be implemented straight out of the study. Okay, that was a lot. And I want to pause. If you have any questions on what this is, happy to take them now. Anybody online? Right.
No, thank you for the explanation.
Moving along is Jason hinted at, where are we talking about? Battery Street is extremely long and we're gonna be looking at the whole thing, from the southern end at Maple Street up to the northern end, just past Pearl Street up to Sherman Street before Battery Street becomes Park Street and heads west to then, transition into North Avenue. This is a very involved corridor. There's a lot of ongoing projects immediately along it happening right now. To the south at Maple Street, there's the Rail Yard Enterprise project. Right, in the left third, there's the Main Street Great Streets project, which includes at Battery Street. That is that project's western terminus. There's also the Amtrak Connections study happening down at Main Street Landing. Beyond that, there were recent bicycle and pedestrian improvements at the intersection of Park Street and Sherman Street. Soon there is going to be a two-way bike facility along North Champlain Street, 1 block east of our project corridor, that will connect via Pearl Street to our Battery Street corridor. And then I believe the Bank and Cherry Street projects are also happening right now. I think those are in design at the city. So this is very active. I think we all know, or if we don't, Battery Street is an extremely critical corridor to the general transportation ecosystem of Burlington. It represents a north-south connection. Pedestrian and bicycle accommodations along the corridor, and I think we're going to be looking to improve things across the board for all users of Battery. So how are we going to do that? This is, for all intents and purposes, our kickoff.
Good.
Yeah.
Question from Sophie?
Not so much a question, but just a reminder that Battery Park is along a majority of that corridor, and we are slated to do a comprehensive plan, but it's further out in the future than we would like, but just those connections to us are really important as well.
Thank you, Sophie. So how do we get there? The general scope of work for a scoping study like this, as Jason alluded to, it starts with an assessment of the corridor as it currently stands. How many people are using it? How many people are driving along it? What projects are currently happening along it? Do we have any data needs along the corridor that we should be going out and collecting information that we don't have? Once we have that, we have our first significant touch point with the public. That's called the local concerns meeting. And that's where you kind of see that bridge across this whole project is, as Gene was alluding to, public and stakeholder engagement. We know that is one of, if not the most valuable elements of a project like this. If we're not doing it for our communities and our stakeholders, who are we doing the project for? So once we have all of that information about the existing conditions along the corridor, we engage with the public, we understand their concerns, we move into an alternatives development phase. And that's where we get into assessing opportunity along the corridor. How can we change this to improve it for walking and biking? How can we change it and make sure it's providing sufficient access to adjacent businesses? Does it have the parking it needs? Does it have the capacity it needs? Realizing this is a commuter route. It's a principal arterial in Burlington's grid system. I know we like to hone in on certain things, but this is truly a complete transportation system when we look at Battery Street as a street. So after we develop those alternatives, we have our next significant touch point with the public. And throughout all of this, I'd be remiss not to mention, we will be meeting with the advisory committee as well. Once we have those comments from this very critical group here, as well as the public, we refine those alternatives. We recommend a future Battery Street via a scoping report. And we move on, and as Jason said, hopefully, eventually we move into funding, acquisition, and design. Any comments or questions on the general process?
So I know that the Champlain Parkway is coming to the south end, and they're looking at the Rail Yard Enterprise project as a way of connecting that to Battery Street. Is that being accounted for in your data collection?
Yes, so there's been a fair bit of traffic forecasting done as part of both the Parkway and the Rail Yard Enterprise project, and the methodologies used and the kind of factors used in that, I believe, will be implemented as part of our traffic collection and application.
Yes.
we are obtaining the information from each of those studies. We've already collected them, and we're going to be incorporating that into our future projections.
I'm gonna pass this to my colleague Karen to talk about how we're gonna engage with the community.
Sure. So really quickly, just want to touch on the sort of cornerstones of our community engagement plan. This venue and the folks gathered at this table, virtually and in person, is certainly part and parcel to that. So really leaning on the advisory committee to guide and shepherd this process. And, you know, you all are more deeply connected to the communities here than we are on a daily basis. So leaning on you all to help in the broader community engagement and reaching your circles and the folks that you interact with on a day-to-day. So certainly one of the cornerstones of the community engagement piece of this effort. We will be doing some targeted stakeholder outreach through stakeholder interviews or focus groups. That will be sort of a tandem effort between the RPC and the city, with VHB supporting to reach out to folks that maybe, you know, haven't been engaged in a process like this previously, but interact with the Battery Street corridor on a regular basis. We want to make sure that we're reaching sort of the folks that maybe haven't had a voice at these types of tables previously, but you know, are utilizing that corridor in various modes. We recognize that Battery Street serves as a barrier in a lot of ways between the waterfront and downtown and some of the neighborhoods that are adjacent to it. So making sure folks are at the table and voicing their thoughts about you know, what's facing the corridor today, and also sort of what they envision for the future of Battery Street, and how we might address some of those issues. We will have a number of public meetings, not just the sort of 3 solicited public meetings oriented to, you know, the project itself, but then additional public forums with the TUC, with City Council, with the DPW Commission, to make sure that we're, you know, sort of spreading the message and ideas that have come up through this process, and making sure that we're getting that collective buy-in across all of the different levels of engagement. And then one of the cornerstones we really see as sort of casting that broader net and making sure that we are getting input from folks both through an online survey tool and some sort of mapping tool where folks can point out issues and opportunities along the corridor and really dig in and think critically and add their voice to comment on what's happening along the corridor and what we should be thinking about addressing as we think about improvements along Battery Street. It's a long corridor and there are a lot of different issues and opportunities, so making sure we have a mechanism in place where folks can interact and feed their voice into the process.
Questions on that?
Only the comment is that the amount of outreach to get involvement is really important, because we know that you can never do enough. And that people will always tell you that they never heard anything about it. And all of a sudden you are messing up everything. You're messing up the way they walk, the way they park, the way they drive, the way they bike. And why didn't I hear about this? And the intersection of this to the so-called parkway is not a parkway anymore, which we name again, and the King Street neighborhood, and on, you know, there are a lot of people interested in this.
Moving on, just to take a brief look at the project schedule here. So we are very on pace with our early March first meeting of these mines right here. Beyond this, our local concerns meeting, as I touched on, is happening in early April or mid-April, excuse me. Behind the scenes right now, we're currently working through the analysis of the existing and some kind of high level at this time, future corridor conditions. After that local concerns meeting, we'll reconvene this committee again and we'll define the purpose and need of this project. That'll be a significant touch point with this group because that is, you are who all we will be looking to truly nail down, you know, what are we all working towards with this effort. From there, the alternatives development and evaluation will occur, and that'll happen through the majority of the summer. And as we get into the fall, we will meet with the public for a second time, third time with this group after we have our alternatives. And from there, we will refine things, move into the new year, develop a report and implementation plan for the project. So.
I just, on the previous point on public outreach, are there any plans for translation or any other accommodations just to make sure we include a broader audience that usually comes out to public meetings and such?
Yes, that is something that we are going to work to make available to people. As to what form that's going to take, we haven't quite got there yet, but we'll be working with the city on that. And Nelson, I don't know if you had anything you wanted to add on that piece.
Yeah, we have a couple translators that we've worked with here as well that we can use as resources, but it's a great question. Thank you for asking it.
And Sophie, if you have any input on that as to knowing particular stakeholder groups that are located near this corridor, that information is always helpful so that we make sure that the right one.
Unfortunately, we haven't done any outreach for battery of late, so I don't have any insight, but it's something we work on every comprehensive plan, and we're always kind of looking for other options of how to include people. So I'm not saying I have the answers, but I hope that we can, you know, try to address that gap in information and insight through this process too.
So Jen, we have some experience with that with the Red Yard Enterprise project that may be useful. We've tried many different things, but with limited success, but we need to continue to find new and creative ways to kind of get at that problem, because it may be also these advisory, local concerns meetings, the time of day and how often we offer them and where we offer them are important.
Sure. Great, thank you, Norm. We might follow up with you just to pick your brain on the experience from the Red Yard Enterprise.
I wanted to add to that. I think outreach and translation or interpreters they're all separate topics of their own that have their own strategies. So just because we have interpreters doesn't mean that we're going to get the people there. And that gets into what Norm says is like, you know, the location and the time is something that needs to be discussed in partnerships too. In the past, we've gone to the organizations like the family room at certain times of their programs where they have 40 people there. And so our models of engagement also needs to be flexible instead of just having it at a council meeting or an NPA. And then in addition to, it's like you do have to specifically do outreach to that group. You know, you can't just like translate. And we do have with the city 7 different ambassadors from different countries that as the trusted community voices that we've used who do share out our meetings. But you know, it's hit or miss because the time of the day. So there's a lot of discussion around this. And if the first meeting is in April, I think that we're behind the game.
I agree. It sounds like we might need to drill into this very quickly, and perhaps calling you that for a little bit of input in that regard. And one of the things you touched on, though, I think is important, and there is set aside for targeted stakeholder outreach separate than the public meetings to try to reach some of those people where they are. As you said, maybe going to community events or other things and really trying to do a different, type of focused outreach if we find we're not reaching particular populations. But your comments are important and welcome.
Is there an openness to more than one meeting in April or whenever the local concerns public meeting? What I'm hearing from Vet and from others, Sophie, is that one is insufficient. It's necessary, but it's insufficient. And I think that, the imperative to move forward, the limited resources, all of the factors that would lead you to set on the number need to also, take into account the fact that perhaps you're doing extra meetings because in the long run, you will be able to reach that many more people more effectively over the course of time. So.
Yeah, one of the things we can consider too that we've had good luck with is perhaps considering it one meeting, but doing a multiple hour open house. So that we might catch that person who's, free in the afternoon, but we then might also catch that person who works a full day. If we are in a place and set it up in a format that we can engage in kind of a rolling fashion instead of having one presentation at 7 p.m. There are a number of ways we can try to attack this problem, but I think we're open to trying to think creatively about it.
And the one problem I see with April is that a lot of people are not yet into their worrying about what's going on in the summertime. And I think the summertime use around the waterfront is going to be a big issue.
I think one of the things we did talk about that in the project schedule, and one of the things, the conclusions we came to is we think we understand the kind of tourism or the increased summer recreation use. And I think what we want to make sure we're getting is some of that demographic who needs to walk and bike and doesn't have a choice. Recreation trips, in a lot of ways, we can figure out what those origins and destinations are even without counting them. But we want to really be one, documenting who is out there and who has to be, or who was out last week when it was snowing because they had to be. That's their method of transportation, and capturing those people. So your concern is noted. We did discuss it, but I think some of that we know those answers. We know how people are getting over to the bike path, or we know how they're getting between tourism and recreation destinations. And what we more want to understand through our data collection is what are those other commuting trips or those other things that are happening.
That's over to you. Sure. Were there any other comments with regard to that before we get into this? I guess I would just want to voice that if you have, any community events going on or in mind that we should try to plan targeted outreach to. Certainly welcome to hearing what those are and if we can figure out how to get to them. I know Ann Nelson has met with the owners of King Street Laundry, and they seem to be open that we might be able to set up a table there at some point to just kind of come and try to meet people there and tell them about this project. So just throw that out there as an idea. And Norm, I see you have your hand raised.
Yeah, so I was just, one thing that I thought was successful in other projects was the idea of having a project website that has an ability for people to provide comments and also get project updates. By signing up via email. Some people don't like to come to meetings and are shy or bashful. Just maybe they could also, if we record the meetings, that they could be available from that site. And then people can provide comments.
Yep.
Just an idea.
Yeah, I think we really like that idea. Basically having a constant open stream for public comment too, with something like a project website, and then always mentioning that that is available at, whether it's a tabling event or a pop-up event or an official public meeting or advisory committee meeting, just really getting that website out there so people know that even if you can't make this date or this time or that date or that time, that is always an open forum to come in and leave comments, and those will all always come to the project too.
And people love a QR code that they can scan and get to a website. They love that. So yes, definitely.
Yeah, just describe how easy it is to make this. Go ahead.
I'm sure you all are going to utilize social media, right? I mean, like making like short campaigns. That was something that was really successful in the 2020 census that I was a lead on. Is like a lot of people got their information from it was like really short, like a minute long in different languages. And we just shot it out to different organizations to say, you count, go here. And it was a good way to be able to direct them to our website too. And also have like a number that they can call, because you can't translate everything that if they have a question for interpreters.
Great suggestions.
Yes, we have that service at Public Works if you need help with that.
Right. That's great. Thank you. Okay. On to the role of the advisory committee, slide that you've been looking at now for a little bit. Let's see, attendance of these meetings, first up on the list. And we'll be sending materials to you at certain points throughout the process that we'll be looking for you to review and provide comment on. Some of those may be in advance of the meeting. Some of those might just be looking at and bringing your comments to an advisory committee meeting so we can all discuss them together as a group. And just ask that, I think we already mentioned this earlier, you mentioned it, that we be respectful of each other's opinions throughout this process. Odds are we might disagree on something somewhere down the line. That's to be expected. That's all part of the fun that we're gonna have. So just, be welcoming of other ideas and everybody else's perspective. And you all represent different entities throughout the city. So, if you're out and about, you're trying to, you're promoting this project or mentioning it to the group or board that you sit on, we'd ask that, if you get feedback or questions that either you can't answer or you want to share with the group, that you bring them back to this table. Can either just email them to us, or if you want to just voice it verbally at an upcoming meeting, that works too. And at the end of it all, we're going to be asking you for your preference on some of the improvements coming out of the study, so that we can hopefully achieve consensus on and bring those to the DPW Commission, the TUC, and eventually the City Council. So it would be your recommendation coming out of this committee at the end of it all that goes upward, eventually to the City Council.
I may be away during one of your meetings, and I would like to have somebody else from the MPA and Board 5 come.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. If you have, that's a great point. If you are not able to make a meeting, but you have somebody that you want to sit in as your proxy, that's definitely welcome. So please do that.
And really your involvement contributes to a more successful project. The more you share this out to your stakeholder group and bring input back, the better informed the project will be. So we really rely on you to be ambassadors for the project.
All right. The fun part. Vision and goals. So obviously, we're very early on in the project. This meeting has really focused on how critical community engagement and focus group outreach will be throughout this whole process. I think it's critical to not lose sight of where we're talking about. I don't know if we've really talked about Battery Street yet. So we would like to hear from this group early on, realizing, as we're doing the background kind of data collection and analysis and investigation at this point in time. While that's happening though, we want to hear from this group, everyone online, everyone here, as long as you're comfortable speaking up. But these questions are not on the screen, are simply, just to get the pot stirred, to get you thinking, what is your vision for the future of Battery Street? What is You know, we, as Karen mentioned, you know, Battery Street, we joke that it could be renamed Barrier Street. It is somewhat of a blockade between the downtown and the waterfront districts. You know, what is, our connections across it, what you see as the most important improvement that can be made to Battery Street. What do you think about walking along Battery Street, biking along Battery Street, parking and accessing business along Battery Street, driving along Battery Street? What do you see as the biggest challenges? You know, these questions are just examples, but we kind of welcome, you know, an open discussion about each of your visions for Battery Street.
Who wants to go first?
Say, don't all speak,
Don't make me call on you.
don't all speak at once.
I am here as a pedestrian. I do not own a car, but I used to, and my problem with Battery Street as it currently is, and which I hope this project will address, is it's a racetrack. People decide they get to Battery Street, they hammer their accelerators down, and they run red lights. They squeal their brakes if they actually see a body in a crosswalk, and sometimes they don't get stopped in time and the pedestrian has to stop. It is an unpleasant experience at any time of year trying to cross Battery Street. I used to belong to a CSA that I had to pick up on the other side of Battery Street, and I was sure all my vegetables would be totally destroyed by somebody. And I think that the people I hang out with are pedestrians or bike riders, and they see Battery Street as the most hellish street in Burlington. And that's why I'm here.
Great opener. Great opener. So there's room for improvement.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I think well said, Barbie. I consider Battery Street to be similar to Williston Road. It has that kind of like fast and furious traffic. I hadn't thought of it as a barrier between downtown and waterfront, but of course it is. I'm not sure how to ameliorate that. But I also liken it to how when Church Street was a road that you drove up and down before they closed it up to the marketplace. And I think about how could you make Battery Street more walking friendly, biking friendly. I would never bicycle ride on Battery Street, not ever on your life. So I would love to see improvement in this.
And when you all call Terry and Barbie here, when you think about Battery Street, are you thinking about one potential where you crossed to get your CSA? Are you thinking about, you know, I kind of see Battery as almost three different sections.
Right.
There's King to Main, there's the hill. And, you know, I wish there was always taiko drummers hammering on their drums at the bottom of it to get me up it, but that's not always the case. And then there's, you know, Pearl to Sherman. Are you thinking, when you speak specifically about being a pedestrian on Battery Street, are you thinking about it from end to end, or is there one section in there that you particularly interact with?
I normally cross at Main Street. Because I live on St. Paul Street and Main, and so I walk down the hill. And that seems to be where, to me, most of the problems occur. The people coming up from the Maple Street area aren't really a problem at that point. They haven't got their head of steam up. But the ones coming down the hill, they're like a racetrack with people vying for position and horns and all of that sort of stuff. I mean, I don't know how the people who live there.
Like the lanes,
Yeah.
lane configurations there too, all of a sudden you're in a left turn lane, all of a
Yes.
sudden you're in a right turn lane.
And there's no advance warning that that's going to be a left turn lane. So if you're familiar with it, you know, and you jockey to get into the left-hand lane if that's what you want. But as a pedestrian standing there watching them come down, you sort of get a feel of a stampede of wild horses. And even when you've got a walk light, you stop and make sure that they're stopping. And I sometimes have to walk up the hill. I want to get to Battery Park and I'm further down Main Street than where I live, so I just go down to Battery and go up. And the big question is always, do I cross and get into the slightly nicer sidewalk on the lakeside?
Yeah.
Or do I have a better shot going up to College Street or even all the way up to Sherman? Or actually Pearl Street to get across if I'm going to Battery Park. And it's always, which way am I going to go? Because is the traffic bad now? Is it going to be better by the time I walk up the hill, which takes longer than it should? And so if I'm trying to get across Battery Street for a relaxing time, it's not a relaxing way to get across Battery Street. It sort of makes me tense. And I am assuming other people have that problem. I've seen people, older people, not even able to get across Battery Street in the time of the walkway.
Barbie, it sounds like, south of Main, you think is less of a problem?
Yes.
The speeds are a little lower, but really improvements in downgrading of the speed north of Main is.
That to me would be wonderful. I am reminded before, coming up from the highway, when we had to merge into the lane before they widened it all the way, that we got the same sort of jockeying for position there, and I'm seeing it again on Battery Street, and there, because virtually all of the turns are left turns, it creates more friction among the driver's horns. It's just not a comfortable place for a pedestrian.
Sure. So I just wanted to add to what you're saying, so I totally agree with you. The Maple Street to Main Street is easier because it's a one lane. When it goes to double lane, that's when it gets to be a much more of a race car area for me. But even with that said, coming down Maple, turning on a Battery, that's a disaster to cross. Also, you know, people are trying to take that right on red at that light all the time. So, you know, it's kind of like a major thoroughfare for people to get onto Main Street at that place.
I used to live further down Pine Street, we would go down.
Yeah.
But even then, it didn't cause the anxiety that further up the hill causes.
I think the worst crossing is the Main Street crossing, that's Battery Street. That's a terrible crossing because you have that arrow that brings the traffic up Main Street from Battery.
Good, I see a comment, yeah, let's go to folks online, I can't tell who does have their hand raised. See a raised hand?
Go ahead, whoever's online that raise their hand.
Ali?
I think,
Ali?
yeah, I think I may be the only one with a hand raised, so I'll go ahead. Thank you. And I apologize for being late. I had another meeting that went till 4:30, so I apologize for missing the first part and any introductions. My name's Ali. I live in the Old North End, and I work in healthcare, and I drive for work, doing home visits for people that are homebound. And I certainly agree with everything I've heard in terms of the speeds that people drive through Battery Street. I also bike for just enjoyment of town and for commuting when I can, and also walk. And there had been a couple of occasions when there had been work being done on the bike path, when most recently when the Amtrak station was being installed, and some parking had been removed from part of Battery Street, and there was a temporary protected bike lane. And I personally loved it. I really enjoyed biking on that part of Battery Street. So that's something that hopefully we can discuss. The other thing is that I know a few staff, some teachers at Burlington High School, and they had shared that this past December, a student had been hit by a car crossing the street on Cherry Street, I think it is, on their way to the high school. So even more need for slowing down the excessive speeds of people driving on Battery Street. And I think that's all I've got. Thank you.
Thank you, Ollie. Anybody else online?
I can put in some input. So I'm a driver, but whenever I go, I agree with everything. Like it's a madhouse where the double lanes are, even for like drivers. And I think that the pedestrians crossing the street too, I do worry for them because I've seen many times like people turn and it's a walk. So something to make it more visible, like those walk signs or stop signs or flashing signs or something like that. I totally agree with that. And then in addition, I'm seeing people walk up on the side of the hotels. And unless you go to those hotels, that's a long walk. So I'm just like, wow, it would be good like for us to make things more social or interactive so that we can set places up for walkers too, or, place like where maybe it is like if we're going to put in some rain gardens or something like that, that people can sit and enjoy, because it's really that side is not, there's not much to really view and to rest or, to do anything else except like walk and go to the hotels if you're there.
Lauren?
Yeah, I'm interested to hear other people's opinions, and I didn't want to kind of jump in early. I wanted to hear what other people's thoughts were, but effectively, the street's 4 lanes of traffic, and you have this challenging situation where you have 2 lanes of traffic, and if someone's crossing in an unanticipated way, it's a blind view, and so it's got this formula for challenges in itself in terms of safety. This whole corridor needs to be rebalanced in terms of use of space, supporting active transportation, walking, and if we try to figure out how this will interface with all the adjacent streets and how this will also fit with our transit service that's important to the success of getting people out of their cars and reducing congestion. So there's a lot to be had here and a lot of opportunity, and looking forward to hearing what people's thoughts are, but there's good work to be done, and I've heard for years how challenging it is for people using College Street to get access to the waterfront, how this would possibly change access to those recreational areas.
Sophie?
I also was waiting like Norm, but Ollie, it's the first time I heard some positive feedback on the temporary bike lanes that we had up during the realignment, so thank you. It was a challenging situation, and we definitely wanted to provide that, the continuation of the bike path while there was construction. So I appreciate hearing that. It was definitely not tipped. The scale was not tipped in that favor, we'll just say. Also, I'm disheartened to hear there was someone from the high school that was hit crossing probably to get to Battery Park. I know we'd met with a high school previously that was looking for green space around the temporary high school, and Battery Park seemed out of the question, and it's just a stone's throw from there. So that's definitely a connective part that's missing. From my perspective, is just like that ability to safely cross into a green space that's right there for all those students, but also anyone who's working downtown. It's a big, quieter park for the most part. And then Pitt, to your comment, people walking on the hotel side, I'm wondering why they're not walking on the park side. But it does feel like there's the corridor is so wide that to me it's an opportunity to add in streetscaping that can make it more of a boulevard, welcoming feeling to everybody, including motorists. I definitely drive through there once in a while, and I definitely feel like I'm a race car driver because of the weaving that has to happen. Just if you're trying to get to North Ave, it definitely gives you that feeling of because it's the wideness, but just the way that the lanes line up, I guess. So I'm really looking forward to the improvements that we can envision for Battery Street.
Jane, you've been quiet.
This gentleman here from the commission has said not boo, so before I wanna give space.
Thanks. I think we've all had close calls on Battery Street, and I agree with all the points here. It's begging to be, its vehicle lane narrowed and or reduced in number, and to make it feel more human scale. Planting benches, a lot of opportunity there.
Bench halfway would be nice.
It's interesting because I think about crossing Battery Street, you know, in that north section, there's that uncontrolled crossing with, that is a dual threat, there's multi lanes in both approaches. I think about, as Barbie alluded to, kind of the crossing of the major intersections, and I think about, aside from just to the west where there is the Burlington bike path with the tree canopy on both sides, there's quite frankly one of the most pleasant walking experiences, I think, in the city on the west side of Battery Street up the hill in the tree canopy.
Yeah.
And how incredibly separated you feel from the craziness that you might have just traversed or came from, right there on this street. And is that an inspiration for something we can attempt to emulate, understanding it is so far from the street? And once we are on that, in that curb to curb area, it is intensely more urban, but can we replicate that feel? Is that a place to go immediately along the corridor for inspiration? To try and streetscape this, to add vegetation, add green infrastructure to make the whole street feel like that feeling you get on the west side of those 2 blocks.
To me, the reason you climb up the hotel side is because you are going to be turning right towards the city.
Yeah.
It is horrifying to think that to get a Pleasant Walk, I have to cross it twice.
Especially if you're going. Yes. Yeah.
There's a reason why it's so pleasant, because nobody walks there, right? And it is just as the feel, as well as I think the reality of being really sort of far away. It's a long way to cross, and not only do you cross a 4-lane highway, but you then cross that berm and graveled area to get to that path. So coming from the north, you've got the traffic coming on North Avenue, and it merges with Park Street. And that is really, really tricky. It's particularly tricky on commuting mornings, backs up a lot. And then the turn up Battery Street as you're driving gets way backed up. And then the navigation to get to the through lane is really, really tricky. So if you're gonna have then people walking, going from the park to Monroe Street, that then really becomes an issue, particularly in commuting areas. So going south on that, the lanes for the traffic and the size of the dinosaurs that we call trucks and cars these days. It's big, but it's actually pretty darn tight, I think. I mean, Norm, the engineer, and the engineers in this room, I think that our building of these lanes is out of line with how large our cars are going. And I actually help park cars at Mad River Glen ski area where we have not enough parking, and these cars are getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and it's really complicated. So that engineered traffic all the way down, going from north to south as a driver, is really difficult. I'm a bike rider, and I will not ride on Battery Street. I shouldn't say I will not. I gotta really work hard. But but I sometimes have to go on that street, or I'll pick a time to go, and then I just seize the entire lane. And it feels really off to feel, to see, and I'll do it. It's like going down Pine Street. I hate going on Pine Street. I think that then just going south, the connections with the Railroad Enterprise District, which we need to have to make the Champlain Parkway work and not destroy King Street neighborhood, means that the turns off of Battery Street into the neighborhoods and all that flow traffic, we really have to figure that stuff out. And you look at, I mean, and I do it, right? I think I go King Street, I can't, you know, I like count the number of cars. And I have this game about how many, if I go up King Street, then how many cars will I beat that are going down Maple? And generally I beat one or two cars. You know, I'm not running the stop lines, stop signs, right? But I'm not speeding through it, but you know, I'm going steady. So those are challenges, and they're challenges not necessarily for Battery Street as much as the neighborhoods. So the neighborhood impact, what we do on Battery Street to not double down on the environmental racism and classism is critically important in that working class, lower income neighborhood is really important. You know, then you've got, I suspect that as we develop the Main Street TIF, there's going to be more development on Champlain Street. And I think that the Amtrak, and there's gonna be more development around the ferry. So when we're thinking about this, the connections with the marina, Perkins Pier, and the use of that becomes really, really important. I would love to be able to ride my bike on Battery Street, so I don't have to go on the bike path and then figure out how I'm gonna get to where I live, which is the Boys and Girls Club, basically, on, you know, Riverside and Oak Street. So, and being up there, so that connection would be really, really helpful. Yeah, all the comments that were made by pedestrians are spot on, and as far as I can see, but when we're looking at this holistically, I definitely will be smart to be planning for what is hoped for is future infill, future intensification of the development of this area. You know, every housing conversation that we have, you know, points in that direction. Everything that you relate to TIP, the reason that we passed TIP is because it's going to foster development. Where is that development happen? It's going to happen in the TIF district. Where is the TIF district? So we need to plug that stuff in, and bikers and pedestrians are critically important, but I sort of don't understand, because this is the soft underbelly to get out of the city, right? And you're gonna hook now up with a major highway to get you out, right? Into 189, into Shelburne Street, Shelburne Road. So good luck, Marty. You're wishing for these, you know, but.
Well, that you're actually raising the question that I had, is that we're gonna have more development, we're gonna have more people, we're gonna have more cars. You know, I just don't know. There's a lot of diminishing returns about how you move cars around, and I don't have a good answer to that. It's good thing we have the civil engineers with us to figure these questions out.
I want to ban cars.
Well, thank you all for your comments, both in the room and online. Were there any more?
I'm just worried if we're thinking of putting housing down there, as Jean just hinted, that's just more pedestrians who are going to be implicated in whatever we do.
That is something when we look at future conditions that we do talk about with the city is really, what do we expect growth to look like? And we do that based on, what planned developments are there, where do we expect the density to increase, what do we expect to be happening? And how will that affect pedestrian trips, vehicle trips, et cetera?
Yeah, and I think the point on the TIF district piece is maybe, a piece that we wouldn't necessarily have fully accounted for, and I think is a really helpful way of framing up that piece of this puzzle.
Perhaps, Brian Fine and David White, who is the consultant, and even Laura. I know that, as the project manager for the Main Street TIF. But we have a lot of DPW viewers, I have no slight intended on that, but, just that, or that those connections.
Yeah, pretty good connection on that Main Street project.
There was a hand up. Ali, did you have your hand up?
Yes.
I did, but I think it was addressed. It was around the Main Street project and coordinating and kind of making it, just coordinating and having it be less segmented and streamlined.
Yeah, I can share, we are the consulting engineers on the Main Street project, so we have that benefit to this project. I think will be huge. We know exactly what's coming, and obviously we have a very, very involved group between Revy and Dayton and Norm, the connection and coordinating with the Ralliart Enterprise project, which is the other critical infrastructure project that's happening right now. So I think everybody is all very much on the same page. That step one is gonna be looking at the existing condition, but that existing condition for a study like this is frankly gonna be Burlington and this general area as it exists when these projects are completed. Because those projects will both be complete before I think anything will happen to Battery Street, understanding this is just getting started.
With the Main Street stuff that's going on, and I mean, it's been wonderful. I see more people going down Main Street to get to the board from it. It's not necessarily going to be the people up at Pearl Street or whatever, but that makes that intersection even more efficient. I used to ride a bike and I gave up the bike because I hated crossing Battery Street. I always got the feeling that if I didn't get stopped in time, some car would whack me, and I'm getting old enough that I worry about stuff like that.
Well, if we can move on to the next steps for the project. As we briefly touched on in the general scope and schedule with things moving forward, we're in the midst of existing conditions collection and analysis. We have scheduled traffic counts in the very near future to get very, very real and recent data for the number of people walking and biking and driving in the area. From that, we will build out a traffic model. We'll understand where those constraints are on capacity, where the lane configurations can be revised. Beyond that, how many people are walking and biking, crossing Battery Street, moving along it. That'll all educate that analysis and subsequently the development of alternatives. Our next step as a project team will be to prepare for that very crucial first public meeting, being the local concerns meeting. And then from there with this group, I think we'll follow up pretty soon with, and I think this might be, I don't know if this will be coming from Dayton. I believe he did the preliminary coordination on rallying this committee, but scheduling our next touch point, which will occur just after that local concerns meeting with this group. Will be crucial to get on folks' calendars as we continue this. Keep this moving.
Beginning of May. Next meeting.
Let me just check there. We have middle of May for the next advisory committee. and middle April for the first public meeting.
Should we just ask folks today, is this time of day good for everyone? Is this, kind of the best time for the advisory committee to get together?
I'm retired, I don't care.
Folks online, a thumbs up on time of day, if this works for folks.
Good.
Thank you.
Great.
All right, good, yeah.
Well, if it's not gonna work for you, I guess let us know, otherwise we'll stick with a 4 o'clock start.
Wow.
By May, the snow will be.
Don't jinx it. Well, with that, we'll conclude. I'll leave the contact information for myself and Jason up on the screen. I think I'll speak for the project team and say thank you all. I think, we know how critical this project is to Burlington and its communities, and more importantly, how critical it will be to regularly and expectedly and sufficiently engage with our communities, our residents, our neighbors, and the like. So thank you all for your time.
Can you email this, I'm assuming it's a PowerPoint too?
Oh, yeah, we can send out the presentation.
That would be great, then it's up to right now, everything.
And eventually we'll upload this recording to the project website.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Really appreciate it.
Is there a product website or not quite yet?
Not
No,
really.
but yeah, I was just on vacation, so it's first on my to-do list this
Alright.
week to get that quick going.
And when you email us, you'll put the link in so that we don't have to,
Oh, yeah, as soon as we have it and it's live, we will send it to you.
thank you.
All right.
Thanks, everybody online, was able to join us.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Take care. Have a
Bye.
good
Thanks,
evening.
take care.
Are there-